All right, welcome back in. What caught my eye this week? The 494th Fighter Squadron. Those are F-15Es arriving at Muwaffaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. This is the home of my last deployment, and this has been confirmed by a CENTCOM tweet, the United States Central Command, showing the jets taxiing in, adding roughly 36 Strike Eagles now concentrated at that base. That's definitely more than double the normal size at any single base in the region. Meanwhile, Iranian commanders have signed a unity pact amid the rising death tolls to defend the regime at all costs. Today, we're going to break down the crisis on the ground, the air asset buildup, carrier movements, supporting elements, allied coordination, Iranian responses, and my tactical read on where this posture might lead to. So let's get into it. We'll do it without a bunch of hype. The protests kicked off late December over the economy in freefall. Hyperinflation making their monetary system basically worthless. Goods became unaffordable, and we saw massive uprising, government crackdowns, and blackouts. And by early January, it escalated. Security forces opened fire on crowds, they raided hospitals to snatch the injured, and they blacked out the internet to stifle coordination and hide any evidence. Casualty numbers are contested, but they're climbing. The Human Rights Activist News Agency, an independent monitoring group with networks inside of Iran, they've verified that at least 5,200 protesters have been killed. That's of January 24th, 2026. This is backed by documented names, dates, and locations. And they have another 17,000 cases that are currently under review, which push those estimates upwards of 22,000 people or higher. For perspective, that's higher than the first year of Syria's civil war by some counts. Iran's government sticks to around 3,100 total individuals. This includes their side as well. Now, UN reporters and activist sources warn it could rise further if the protests continue to face this immense crackdown. Numbers like these are fluid in a blackout situation, so we're going to try to keep you updated with verified data as best we can as this continues to emerge. The arrests have toppled over 40,000 documented, with mass detentions and threats of charges of crimes waging war against God, which carries a death penalty in Iran. The regime is cornered and it's lashing out to hold on to power. But this level of repression is only fueling resistance. That's the spark for this visible military response I think we're starting to see. The air buildup has definitely caught my attention, as well as many others across the globe. Late last week, we started to see tanker movements via open source reporting. And then on January 18th, the 494th Fighter Squadron deployed. Recall, this is the Strike Eagle Squadron back in April of 2024 that was part of Operation True Promise. This was Iran's massive barrage of over 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles that were targeted at Israel. The 495th launched multiple crews again and again to intercept and down more than 80 drones. This was the most dense defensive air campaign in recent history, one that has been garnered as the largest aerial campaign since World War II. The unit garnered multiple distinguished flying crosses with valor and were awarded Silver Stars to 2 of their crew members. And we actually did a breakdown video of this last year when it happened. So on January 18th, 12 F-15 Strike Eagles departed RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, supported by tankers to make their journey into the Middle East that much easier. Multiple tankings across Europe and into the Mediterranean, as well as C-17s following in trail with personnel and equipment for sustainment. This is confirmed by flight data, as well as defense coverages like the Air and Space Forces magazine, as well as the CENTCOM tweet with the jets arriving at Muwaffaq Salti Air Base. Before we dive further, let's take a quick look at the Strike Eagle itself. Now, this is a twin-engine, multi-role fighter. It has a pilot with a complement of a weapon system operator, or better known as a WISO, that sits in the back, who's running the targeting pods, the radios, releasing ordnance, etc. It has a tactical radius of about 900 nautical miles. That's without tanking. Obviously, they can be extended much further with tanking. Carrying AIM-120 missiles and AIM-9X missiles, those are for air-to-air engagements, long-range BVR, beyond visual range, or close-in with an IR missile such as AIM-9X. Also carrying a whole bunch of JDAMs and other precision-guided air-to-ground weapons, including laser-guided rockets for lighter targets, which have been very effective in recent years when it comes to these loiter drones or these one-way attack drones. It excels at deep interdiction and loitering. We saw in Operation Midnight Hammer the inclusion of F-16 Block 50 Wild Weasels. This brought a kinetic capability to the suppression of enemy air defense side of the house. Now the F-35 is slowly onboarding this sea capability, just like the F-16 took it on from the F-4 back in the day. These two work really well, bringing a kinetic as well as an electronic suppression of enemy air defense capability to a region. However, we look at Venezuela, we didn't see the inclusion of F-16s in this fight. Now there were other kinetic capabilities coming from EA-18 Growlers, being able to carry the HARM, the high-speed anti-radiation missile, the AGM-88. So undoubtedly, these all work together when it came to the Venezuelan airspace and their integrated defense network, which was basically rendered useless during the Operation Absolute Resolve at the beginning of January. So back to the Middle East. We now have 3 F-15E squadrons, roughly 36 aircraft that are now, according to open source, in the Middle East, all within about 500 nautical miles from the Iranian border. This makes it relatively easy to get to any targets on that western side of Iran in about under an hour. Now, obviously, it changes depending where targets might hypothetically be inside a country like Iran. But you mix in other assets in the region, such as A-10s, Patriot missile batteries, THAAD batteries. You now have a layered defense to handle retaliatory attacks, such as drone attacks, etc. This creates a pretty robust forward hub for the United States in the region. Again, we've been here for quite a while, but as we see these buildups that have occurred over the last 18 months for various operations, this tends to show a pattern. Now, if we layer in the next piece, the naval piece of this, you have the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, which again, according to open source reporting, has now been rerouted from the South China Sea and is tracking towards the Middle East or the Indian Ocean at somewhere between 20 and 25 knots, putting it in CENTCOM waters. Again, that's United States Central Command. Now, this is a Nimitz-class carrier accompanied by multiple other ships and submarines. Now, from the air side of it, the Carrier Strike Group is going to carry a massive punch with upwards of 90 aircraft with Super Hornets, Growlers, F-35Cs. So you have a mix of 4th and 5th generation fighters, all with various capabilities to make it a pretty strong hammer when it comes to knocking down someone's door. Inside that Carrier Strike Group, you're going to have destroyers for escorts. They're going to be outfitted with Tomahawk missiles, as well as air defense capability. Additionally, littoral combat ships for close-in work. This can provide self-contained and layered protection for the Carrier Strike Group, hundreds of nautical miles away from it. And we can absolutely be assured that lurking below the surface are going to be submarines carrying Tomahawk missiles and other defensive capabilities for the Carrier Strike Group. And not to mention that the Carrier Strike Group just showing up in of itself is a very visible deterrent and power projection mechanism for the United States. So now we know we have multiple fighter assets, tanker assets, cargo assets that are plussing up in the region. Carrier Strike Group moving into the region. Now we talked about the capability that we saw with Operation Midnight Hammer with the B-2. Now it would not be surprising to potentially see the B-2s operating out of Diego Garcia, which is a small island in the Indian Ocean, greatly reducing the distance a B-2 would have to fly in order to provide operational support, kinetic capability in the Middle East region. In Midnight Hammer, this is definitely one piece of the mission and a place that people are watching, anticipating that B-2s moving there, and in fact they did prior to Operation Midnight Hammer, being able to reach out and strike Iran from a close distance. However, with Midnight Hammer, we clearly saw that the United States was able to fly these aircraft from the middle of the United States of America, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, all the way to the Middle East and back. So how these are used and implemented, and if they're implemented in a hypothetical strike, is TBD. But there's a lot of capability that the B-2 brings to the fight. Undoubtedly, Patriot and THAAD missile batteries are going to be reinforced across the Gulf. They were key in Operation Midnight Hammer in follow-on retaliatory attacks at protecting our assets, and we have already seen, again, movement from key bases in the region, reducing footprints. We've seen civilian carriers beginning to cancel flights into the region, which all, again, are potential indicators that something might happen. As we've seen, it usually happens on the weekend. Al Udeid Air Base is central to all of this, a key node in the United States military and coalition operations for the past 2 decades plus. We've seen KC-135s and KC-46s swapping in and plussing up when it comes to this, according to Reuters, with over 30 tankers that have moved out of Europe recently into the region, bolstering operations as tensions have continued to build. And we haven't even talked about cyber and space domains, which you can guarantee are already engaged. They've been engaged forever. Looking at the Venezuela operations, where they shut down Russian and Chinese surface-to-air missile systems, integrated air defenses, which only were amplified by F-35 and the Growler suppression of enemy air defense capabilities. From satellite overwatch to network disruptions, these are the invisible players that amplify conventional capabilities. The overall posture adds up to endurance when it comes to the United States, which they can maintain for weeks, if not months, something that Iran really doesn't have the luxury of. A collapsed economy, which I think it's fair to say Iran's feeling it, doesn't really have a whole lot of time to counter and a lot of strength to muster it up. This is a full spectrum setup, leading to the bigger question of why now? The US isn't solo here. The United Kingdom has deployed Typhoons. They've deployed them to Al Udeid Air Base, 4 to 6 from Joint RAF Qatar number 12 Squadron. Under their defense pact, multi-role platforms, advanced radars, Meteor missiles, all for air superiority, Storm Shadow and Brimstone for ground strikes have framed this as a potential to get involved. And it should come as no surprise the intelligence coordination ongoing with Israel, between the United States sharing information with Israel, such as satellite imagery, and Israel providing ground-based intel for things that are going on inside the regime. But also our Gulf partners, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all have vested interest clearly in what's going on in their neighborhood. From hosting defensive forces, offensive forces, overflight permission, threat assessments. Obviously, I think it's fair to say they would all prefer a de-escalation, but they do want to weaken regime for concessions on proxies and oil, not just spiking prices and invoking chaos and inviting further attacks. This is allied buy-in that adds layer, but also restraint to any aggressive moves. Still, with everyone in position or en route, it builds curiosity on the end game and how this will play out. But Iran is clearly pushing back, not only internally, but externally. Their army, their military members, their commanders have all signed a cooperation pact. There's an X post out there, and they're out there signing this pact to defend Iran to the last drop of blood, thwarting any plans by outsiders to make an attack. And a senior Iranian official spoke to Al Jazeera saying any U.S. attack, limited or not, is a full-scale war declaration with Iran. Internally, protests rage, and the crackdowns have been brutal from the things we have seen that have leaked out into the public eye. Airlines like KLM have suspended flights to the Middle East, avoiding the airspace over Iraq, Iran, Israel, and the Gulf. A lot of political ripples that are moving through with these high tensions. This rhetoric escalates the stakes, but it's the posture on both sides that opens the door to what might come next. From a tactical view, here's what I think, here's my logic. Obviously, air superiority would be lopsided. We have F-35s, F-15Es. We have all the capability a carrier strike group brings to the region. F-18s, Growlers, E-2 Hawkeyes, Tomahawk missiles, and a whole host of other things. Right now, we know we have Typhoons in the region, a very capable and robust fighting force. Iran already took a pretty hard knock when it came to Midnight Hammer. Their integrated air defense network was rendered, again, basically useless. And now they've been battling internal strife and protests. So it's a very dicey situation, I would imagine, inside that region. Now, Iran, they have 1970s, 1980s relics. There have been some reports of them getting the Su-57. With actually reports popping up on X with the Su-57 being flown in Russia and hearing Persian speakers in the background. But they got a long way to go, and they've been battling quite a lot. But what we haven't seen just yet is the F-22 on the move. Rest assured, spotters across the globe probably find these things as they move out. But here's the question. Does an operation inside Iran again require an F-22? We saw what happened with Operation Midnight Hammer. The United States military has dissected that. Then fast forward and taking a look at Venezuela. While the F-22 was there, maybe now the need in this particular scenario doesn't quite warrant Big Brother having to show up. You do have F-35s there. You do have Strike Eagles there. So you're bringing a lot of air-to-air capability to the fight, not to mention F-18s. Mix in some cyber and space. Again, erase their integrated air defense capability. Now the ability to operate inside Iran in that contested environment might just be a little bit more palatable than it was once thought of before. Long-range strike capabilities are obviously brought to the table with various weaponry such as Tomahawk missiles, GBU-39s, utilizing stealth aircraft to penetrate deep inside enemy territory, utilizing other platforms to jam and remove command and control capability, creating chaos. A layered approach to reduce collateral damage, but also incapacitate the enemy. Now, blending in the bigger picture, again, it appears that most of the players needed for some kind of operation inside Iran are in town or shortly going to have arrived in town. We have 4 deployed fighter squadrons, carrier strike group, inbound resources, as well as more allies reinforcing this. Cyber and space, as I've already alluded to, are undoubtedly heavily involved in this. And again, if we remember what transpired in Venezuela, Russian and Chinese surface-to-air missile systems, which were touted as some of the latest and greatest, were rendered completely useless, more or less. What that red line is to see U.S. intervention in an aggressive strike is to be determined. Obviously, there's a lot of bad stuff happening in there now. But my assessment, based on the patterns from Midnight Hammer, they could be off base, but things change hourly, and these things are indicating that there is a massive buildup that we saw similar to Operation Midnight Hammer, that we saw similar to Absolute Resolve. When this might transpire, if it might transpire, is yet to be determined, but we'll keep you updated. Bottom line, the regime is cracking down brutally. U.S. and allies are postured with some serious capability and firepower. So we'll watch the Lincoln's arrival window and the regime's next moves. So this could up the leverage, could up the sanctions, or it could tip into full-scale escalations, but we'll keep our eyes on it.